Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome to the stage of the Rafael, the director, Marc Turtletaub, and the star, Kelly Macdonald. Well, welcome to the Rafael. This is such a beautiful film and so timely and so timeless at the same time. It's really tremendous. But I have to ask you if this is true. By the end of your shoot, all the cast and all the crew were doing puzzles. Is this really true?
Most of the cast and crew.
There was a ringleader.
Well, the first thing I just wanted to ask was, Marc, you as not only a director but as a producer and as an actress in demand, you see so many projects all the time, and it's such an incredible commitment of time and energy and love put into it. Could you both kind of give me an indication of what that was like when you first read the script?
Well, I was, I don't know, I think it's usually quite clear from the first few pages of reading something, if I feel it's something I'm drawn to or not. It's really just sort of very black and white, and I just was so intrigued by Agnes's story and was really rooting for her, and I had been given a synopsis of the script before I read it, and I kind of assumed it was going to be about the puzzle competition, like that was going to be the main event, and it's really not. Thank goodness.
Like the Karate Kid or something.
Yeah,
like that?
Yeah, Rocky.
Rocky of puzzles.
So I immediately responded positively, and I was working on a film in London, and Marc very kindly flew over to meet me, and we had a cup of coffee, and he said, I would really like you to play Agnes, and I said, I would really like to play Agnes, and that was it.
So for me, hello everyone, and thank you for coming out. So for me, it's as with Kelly, it's the written word that starts for us. We have to see it on the page. And you find so few screenplays that are so well developed. And this was sent to me by two producer friends who knew I was looking to direct at that point, and sent it along. And much of what you see on the screen was on the page. And that doesn't happen very often. And so when that does happen, and it's a story about a woman over the age of 40, a woman finding her authentic voice, beautifully written, you grab it.
Yeah, it is beautifully written. This was Oren Moverman, from who, not only a writer but a director, The Messenger, and other great films. In fact, it's been on the stage a couple of times. Yep. I don't know if this was true as well, but I heard you describe this film as a coming-of-age film.
Yeah. I totally believe it is. I think the timing of Agnes's sort of journey is quite interesting, because her children are about to leave the nest, and her life has been looking after them and her husband, and really she's had nothing outside of that. The church a little, but she sort of, I think, has been stuck in time almost from, we thought she probably got married when she was 18, and before that had lived in that house with her father, and he died, and she took it very badly and needed a bit of looking after. That's sort of suggested in the film. And then Louis looks after her, but in quite a smothering way. And I think I think she just missed her coming of age, and it's just been a bit stunted.
Yeah, just like 20 years later.
Yeah, it's not a midlife crisis. It's like she's not there yet. That'll happen.
And you hear other things too, and I found this intriguing as well, that Marc there was no rehearsal time on this? And
No, we had time. We chose not to. I directed before where we did rehearse, and then I began working without rehearsal. And when you have incredible actors like Kelly and Irfan and David, I found that it was much fresher when you don't rehearse a scene. You talk about it, you get on the set, and then let them bring in what they're going to bring in. These are world-class actors. And for me, I'll always direct that way. I read an interesting interview with an older director saying, every time I cast an actor, it's like a little death. And I guess what he was
Charming.
saying, yeah,
yes, thank you.
that's the end of the story. No, what he was saying, I think, was I have an idea how those words should be said and how the actor should move, and they're obviously not going to do that. They're going to do it their own way. And for me, it's just the opposite. When you cast a Kelly Macdonald or an Irfan Khan, they're going to surprise you in some way that you never anticipated, and that's really the magic of making a film. And so we didn't rehearse. We just talked about key scenes, and then you can always adjust on the day.
And how did that work for you? Were you like saying,
I
I'm
was
waiting
quite-
for something, or a relief?
I sort of confessed today actually that I was delighted because I was really focused when I got to New York. I was told there would be a week of rehearsals, and I'd been working on the accent, but I didn't actually get to sit down with the dialect coach until I got to New York. So I really wanted to get that right, and it's just so embarrassing when you're in a rehearsal period and you're not quite there yet. I'm always there by the time we start shooting, but I just was really pleased. I was just stalling that moment of having to say it out loud in front of anyone. And I feel a lot of the time rehearsal periods are, it's an exercise in getting to know the people you're going to be working with, and we did that anyway. We sort of went out. We went and visited the set that we were going, the house that we were going to be filming in, and we got all that time.
We cooked a meal together.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds...
The cooking class.
Yeah, I thought you were born in New York. I didn't know that.
Bridgeport.
But seriously, in your when I look at Boardwalk Empire and I look at other things that you've done, I see this act of coming of age or growth or finding one's own voice in what you do in such a natural progression. It's really amazing and beautiful to watch. So thank you.
Thank
for
you.
that
was,
so
but,
much.
but I just did what was on the page.
Well, shall we open it up for questions? Sure. Okay. Gentleman right here.
I'm curious about the relationship with the DP, because as I'm watching that, I just felt like I was flowing as if I was being carried by the story, literally flowing through the story, whether it be acting and the cinematography. It was quite beautiful.
Did people hear that? The comment was about the cinematography and how quite beautiful it was and added to the whole story and the mood. Can you tell us something about the
The name of the
cinematographer?
cinematographer is Chris Knorr, and I'd never worked with Chris before. When we first met, you interview a few DPs to see who you want to work with, and I had in my mind, it's really not an exact match, but this movie Ida by Pavel Pawlikowski is very formally shot. That one I think is in black and white actually, but there was something about it, the sort of ethereal quality of that, and the framing, and the fact that a lot of it is shot inside doors and through windows, and a lot of framing of the character. And Chris sat down with me, we started talking, and then he said, I have a couple of images I'd like to show you. Of course, he took out pictures from Ida, and I went, you're my guy. And so I think we just saw the same picture, but he's a master. And one of the things he did, just as an example, we wanted to differentiate the house in Yonkers. We shot Yonkers for Bridgeport. And we wanted to differentiate that from New York as Kelly begins to progress, as her clothing changes, as we wanted the houses to feel different. So in Bridgeport, what we did is he began to pump a lot of smoke into the house. And in the early scenes, I wanted it to almost feel like 1950s in those silhouettes. And a lot of people said, I thought it was a period piece for a couple of minutes. And the sense that we wanted to create is that she's stuck in time. It could be 1950s as far as she's concerned. And then when she gets to New York, we took out all the furniture in that ridiculously opulent house. We took out all the furniture and just had this lonely guy banging around in this big house after his wife has left him, but no smoke, no furniture, and really bright light coming through, not diffused. And so that's Chris Knorr.
Other questions? Yes.
How do you answer?
No. Physically, I mean, she becomes more and more present. I don't know how else to describe it.
Do you think?
Can I answer just one
Yeah,
thing? There's a
sure.
moment in the film. I kind of feel the same way when I watch the film, and in retrospect. There's a moment where after she's been at Robert's house, the Irfan Khan, where she goes and we have that montage and you hear, Ave Maria, and she starts walking down the street and she goes past these windows and you see her reflection. I love that moment. And when I read it, I had this picture and I kept saying it to the DP. I kept saying, yeah, and then she'll go like this with her hair. And it doesn't quite work when I do it. But there's that moment where she becomes sort of aware of herself again and how she looks for the first time maybe in years. And I think that's what you're seeing.
Yes, additional questions. We have a woman anywhere here who wants to ask a question? This is more of a man's film, yes, okay. Yes, you.
If you could put yourself back in your character, did you leave your husband?
If you could put yourself back in your character, would you leave your husband?
Did I?
Did you leave your husband?
Did you leave your husband?
I don't really, I don't feel that's sort of important. I feel that her journey has begun and it has to end with herself. She could have fallen into any pair of strong arms and that would be okay for a minute, but she would still have to work herself out, because you have to do that or you're no good to anyone else, I think. So yeah, I think she's going to find Agnes.
When we talk about how the film could be any period, and some people thought, well, at first it was a period piece, and obviously it's not. In terms of when you were reading this and developing the character, what's going on now with women, not necessarily the Me Too part, but just in general, did that affect you think how you address the as a director and how you addressed it as an actress?
I think we predated the Me Too movement by a bit, but I think it's timeless in a way. It's relevant. It would have been relevant to my mother certainly, and it's relevant today. I think there are people that are sort of stuck in their life circumstances, and in particular women, many women still today. And so it just felt like a really relevant script today when I received it. And
yeah, no, it definitely is relevant and timeless. I was just wondering about the timing, but
yeah, no, we weren't. It was all sort of predated.
I forgot how long it takes to make a movie.
Yeah, it takes a while.
But I think a lot of people want to know, how much the prize was when you won.
Yeah. That kind of the interesting thing, the way I'll answer that is, the interesting thing about it is, and what I liked about it is that it's not the Rocky of jigsaw puzzling. It's not about the contest, and so we really minimized it. We shot a lot of the contest, and then in the editing room, we just kept cutting it, saying that's not what the movie. We knew that wasn't what it was about, but we had this footage, and we realized it's really about Kelly's character finding her voice and about her relationship with her husband, her children, and this new guy, but mostly about her finding her voice. And so we just minimized it and cut right to the bathroom where she calls her family and says, "I won." And I love that scene in the bathroom because she goes through this moment of sadness when she's calling, the melancholy of calling her child and hearing that her children are fine without her. And then she laughs in the same next instant when Irfan calls through the door. We have, can I get your free flyer? And just this roller coaster that she goes on. I love that moment.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Other questions? Yes, this woman over here.
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to comment that I really enjoyed the movie a lot. The humor that you have from the very beginning when you take us along and all of a sudden she's doing all this work as a servant to everybody else, and then you find out she's hosting her own work.
The comment was how much she enjoyed it, and
Thank
a
you.
reference to the birthday party, which was amazing.
Yeah, I think in that first scene, you just get Agnes. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
and we can tell the rest of the story.
You learn so much about Agnes in the that first scene. It's great. Other questions? Yes, the gentleman right here.
Kelly, have you known Irfan Khan before? Because I think it would be difficult if somebody you know, in the opening scenes, there's that kind of uncomfortable distance between you two. How did that play out of getting to know him and then playing the two characters?
The question is, did you know Robert before making the movie?
No, I hadn't met him before. But it's like any job I do. I generally haven't met the people I'm working with, and then you have to establish quite close sort of connections quite quickly. And we shot the film. It was almost like in two parts. We shot the family scenes and all the Bridgeport stuff, and a lot of me on my own. I didn't realise quite how much I would be on my own in the film. And then Irfan arrived, and it was just like it was like starting a different movie. He had this incredible energy and passion for the project, and I wanted to match that because I'd been on the film for a little while by that point.
Mark, can you tell us a little bit more for the audience about Mr. Khan if they're not familiar with him?
About his
Work. And
Oh yeah, well he's one of
how
our great actors, and I didn't know him either. I knew him as the Indian guy in sort of big American movies, Jurassic World and things like that. But where I really began to appreciate his work was in some of the smaller movies. The Lunchbox, if you haven't seen, is a lovely movie, right? Indian movie. And then he was on a TV show, which is a great vehicle for actors called In Treatment, and he was great in that. And when you get to see him in those, smaller character-driven roles, you can't take your eyes, kind of like Kelly, you can't take your eyes off them. And my producing partner, Peter, had suggested, because it wasn't written in any particular ethnicity, Irfan. I thought it was genius. And then had to call him in Mumbai and say, hey, you want to come to America for 9 days? And fortunately, he did.
was a woman with a question right there in the middle? Yep, you.
I will echo the other woman over here. No question, other than just to say the role that you played and the strength of your character was phenomenal. And I think for me, that's why I don't really have any questions per se, because I think the movie carried itself and everything you did.
That's really lovely. Thank you so much.
Way in the back, last row. Yeah, the comment is that she was happy that Louis was not a complete monster.
Yeah, I think a lot of that, it's David Denman, who, when we talked about being in the movie, I wanted someone who had a lot of heart. because I didn't want him to be a stereotypical heavy husband, a sort of stick figure. I wanted him to be a real person who sort of trapped himself in the way he's been brought up. And David saw the role exactly the same way, and I thought he played it beautifully. And you could see even when he says things that make you cringe, or he grabs Kelly and pushes her, you know, you could lose him really easily as a character if you didn't see his love underneath that for her and the kids. And in particular, you see that for me in the moment where he takes the piece of plate out of her foot and looks at her after she's told him she's had an affair, and you can see how much he still loves her.
Yes, right here.
This is easy.
We're going to leave.
I needed to go away last weekend, so I went up to Sonoma to stay with friends. And the wife and I spent the weekend going to thrift stores looking for puzzles to keep the husband quiet, and hoping that he would be so pleased he cooked, which he did.
Thank you. I have a list of 10 questions here I'd like to ask. Do we have other questions? Yes. Oh, you know, my peripheral vision is off right over here.
Thank you. I'm just curious, you know, the music was great.
Yeah.
And is there plans for packaging a soundtrack?
We do. We do have a soundtrack album that should be out soon.
It's Dustin O'Halloran, who's like an amazing composer. He's a bit of a genius, I think.
Yeah, he was nominated for a movie called Lion, and really fortunate to have him do the score. And then he also introduced me to Anna Brun, who sings that last song, who's a Norwegian who lives in Sweden. And together they wrote that last song. Yeah, they're quite talented.
Yes.
This is really trivial compared to the questions about the movie, but is there such a thing as a jigsaw puzzle contest?
Yeah, I guess there is actually. And in my research, such as I did, there was a documentary. I didn't go to any of those competitions, but there is a national jigsaw competition. And it's a great little documentary because you see all these people have their specialized techniques for how they compete, and they're careful not to share it with anyone else.
Yes, okay, whoever you're pointing at, go ahead. About the dialogue?
The accent.
Accent, yes.
It doesn't just sort of come out of nowhere. I definitely have to put in the hours, but I don't know. It takes as long as I've got. Is the honest truth. So I think I worked on it for a few weeks on my own, and then I had the week before we started shooting, and that's when I really, put in the hours.
When is the film going to open, by the way?
The 27th, a week from Friday.
Oh, yeah, great.
New York and LA, and then it expands out.
Well, it's such a pleasure, as you can see from everyone, when you have a movie. When you have a movie. When you have a movie that touches people in this way, and it is such an amazing effort, but it's so you don't see any of it. It just happens, and we know it doesn't just happen. It happens through great artistic integrity and hard work and love and passion. So thank you for that gift.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all.
That was lovely.